Hi girls. This last ever section, is about energy efficient housing. So nowadays the trend is to look at things that will use less electricity, to be more energy efficient, looking at ways that you can use to make your house a lot more comfortable without having to spend a lot on electricity. So there are certain features in a design of a house, or like when you're picking your first unit or your house, that you want to consider when you're purchasing it. And with some of these design features, it can mean that you need to use heaters and air conditioners much less, which will reduce the electricity that you're using and will, in the long run, be more energy efficient and more environmentally friendly as well. So here's a couple of things that can help um, to become more energy efficient. The first one, it may not seem like a really big thing, but the orientation of the house is really important. So in the southern hemisphere, you'd want all your living areas, or the areas that you want to spend the most time, to be facing north. So during the winter, the sun rises a lot later and sets a lot earlier. So if your living areas are facing north, you actually make the most of the sunlight that you do get. If you're in the northern hemisphere, you actually want your houses to be facing south. So that's just something interesting. You also want the long axis of the house to run from east to west. So what that means is, if this is north, then you want your house to be going this way, and you want your living areas to be on this side of the property. Okay, so you're going to get the most sunlight going down this way, so that's why you want these areas to be where you're going to spend the most time. And if it's going east to west, then you're maximizing the amount of sunlight that you're receiving on that side. Another thing that will help is insulation. So if you're in a house, usually you want to make sure that there's insulation in your roofs. Light colored roofing will also help. Um, Light colored roofing is more for reflecting the summer sun. So it's sort of insulation will help you keep the inside warm. The light colored roofing will help to keep the heat out, especially during the summer. Double glazed windows will also help as well. So double glazed windows, it means that you can have sunlight coming in, but it won't be like too much, and you won't have as much heat leaving the house as well in the winter, or you'll have a bit more going out during the summer. Windows and skylights. So if you have, again, we're talking about north facing. So if you've got massive windows facing north, it allows a lot more sunlight in during the winter, and it will provide light and also heat. So it means that during the day you won't need to turn on your lights, you won't need as much heating as if you didn't have those windows. When it comes to summer, you also want to make sure that there's ventilation. So cross ventilation means that there is a way for air to move from one side of the house to the other side of the house. So if there is if there is that avenue, that channel, it means that the air can actually move straight through the house, which will allow your house to be cooled down. So heat doesn't just pool in one certain area. Other things that can help are landscaping and shading. So rather than using air conditioning, if you had like a big tree in your backyard or in the front yard, then that can also provide um, a lot of a little bit more cooling for the house, rather than having like the sun directly onto the bricks and the windows and such. Um, when building a house, materials should also be considered as well. So if you live in a single brick house, often it'll be much warmer than if you lived in a double brick house. So a double brick means there's two layers of bricks that make up your wall. So there's the pocket of air in the middle that actually does provide a bit of insulation as well. So it does tend to keep your house a little bit cooler in the summer. So that would also be something to consider. But definitely, if you're building a double brick house, it's going to be twice as expensive as building a single brick house. So that's another thing that you do need to consider. So the types of questions that you can get here, you can see some of them in your textbook. It could be questions talking about, oh, which house is, which aspect is most conducive to energy efficiency or things like that. It could be a question where you're doing calculations based on house plans. It could be a question which is depending on your on calculations of rates and things like that as well. So this one's just an example that was in the textbook. So as a general rule, the total area, window area, should be less than 25% of the floor area of a house. So usually they'll give you information about what should be happening. So it's not something that you just need to regurgitate. Give an estimate of the maximum window area of a rectangular house if the dimensions are 15 meters by 7.8. So the first thing we need to work out is the area of the floor. So the floor area is 15 times 7.8, and that's 117 square meters. So we know the window areas needs to be less than 25% of that. So the window areas is 25% of 117, and that's 29.25 square meters. So your total windows that you need on this particular house shouldn't exceed 29.25 square meters. Maximum window area 29.25 meters squared. Okay, so that's just an example of a question that you could get. It could be a question about it might be a question where they ask suggest ways that a house can be more energy efficient or things like that as well. So it could be a recommendation type question. So these are all things, even if you don't get a question about this in your actual exam, these are also important things to be considering when, in the future, if you're looking for an apartment to move into, or if you are actually looking for your first property to purchase as well. Okay.